Good evening, good to see you all. Hope you've had a reasonable weekend in spite of the weather, and if you've been in Auckland, it's been fairly interesting, fairly wet. Okay, so last time we nearly finished covering off forgiving others, and there's not a lot else to say about that from what I've said in the previous blogs, except for this, that two things. One is that some of you may find that you're simply unable, even the thought of having to forgive this person is just, it's completely, beyond you. So you need to understand that, first of all, that is okay. There is a sense of injustice. You've been wronged, and it's not easy. It's not naturally in us to forgive. But you only have, you have kind of three paths. One is that you can choose to embrace what I believe is the truth, that God created a way for us to be forgiven and to forgive others by Him forgiving us, and you can ask Him to help you. If you picture the fact that you don't have any forgiveness in you, and God has this well of forgiveness, and if you ask Him, say, God, I need your forgiveness. I can't forgive that person because I think they're so-and-so, but you can give me your forgiveness for them. There is a transaction that can take place if you'll invite God into that place in your life. And whether you do that, it's up to you. That's what I do. That's what works, because it's the truth. It's reality. Secondly, though, you may just find that you need some time. You might need to come to terms with the fact that it's like you've had this comfort blanket of anger or unforgiveness for years, and suddenly I'm suggesting that you need to not just unwrap it, but you need to set fire to it. Very scary. We find security in all kinds of negative things. Abused women stay in terribly destructive marriages because there is a sense of security and of safety, and because it's known, even though it's destructive, So your heart and your mind and your spirit will need to come to terms with that okay, I'm going to have to let go of this. I'm not letting go of anything that's good. I'm going to embrace something that's good by letting go of this when it's bad. And so don't beat yourself up if you can't forgive now. Understand you might need to get to that place, but you only will if you're willing to acknowledge the fact that I need to deal with this. I need to forgive this person, because if I don't, it's going to destroy me. You have to get to that point of realization, and I don't have a solution for you ultimately outside of God, because God will forgive you for what you've done and will give you His forgiveness to be able to forgive others. And whilst I couch it in Christian terms, because I believe that to be reality, it's also just a principle of life. Like the principle of sowing and reaping and other things that I talk about. If you don't believe in the principle of gravity, it still works, right? It wouldn't matter. There's no way to stop. It's a universal law, and forgiveness is exactly the same. So you need to keep that in your mind, that you're going to have to come to this place if you're ever going to deal with it. All right, so that I've taken you through the steps to be able to get to a point of forgiving somebody who has wounded you. So the last thing to cover off on that before we get on to forgiving ourselves, and I almost hesitate to do this, but it would be remiss of me to not, and that is this, that you might need to make some decisions about whether there's anything that you need to say to or some form of contact with the person who's been the object of your unforgiveness, and that will be determined by what the event was. And I can't give you a useful formula even. I'm just raising the subject with you that for some of you, let's say for example that you've been sexually abused, and the abuser is a member of your family or extended family. Now, some people are able to forgive that person and they just get free. It's dealt with. Other people, they need to, even if the other person doesn't acknowledge it, for them to actually complete the cycle and to have some closure, they need to be able to say what they needed to say to that person. I remember my very close relative of mine who'd been sexually abused by her father, and it was relatively minor on the scale of abuse, but it had totally screwed up her life, to be frank. So 30 years or 25 years after the event, she was dealing with exactly what I've been teaching you. So what she did was she wrote a letter to her father saying, when I was 13, you did da 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 da, and I'm writing to tell you that I forgive you for that. So for her, she was able to state what had happened. Didn't matter what his response was. And they were very estranged anyway, the relationship. But she was able to choose to forgive him and to make sure that he knew. It's a funny thing with abusers, and I've known a few. Their selective memory, because their consciences are so damaged, there's just no acknowledgement often. So that for her brought significant closure, really set her free in a way that wouldn't have happened otherwise. I know that I'm just using sexual abuse as an example because it's kind of obvious or clear cut in some ways. I know of other situations where people have confronted their abusers, and all they've been looking for is to get an acknowledgement from that person that it really happened. And sometimes it doesn't come, but for them even just be able to be in a room with them and to say, you did this to me, and I'm choosing to forgive you. I've heard many, many stories of where those relationships have actually been they have been healed because God's gotten involved and has brought healing, but the people who've done the damage are so affected by the fact that the victim would forgive them that it actually brings an acknowledgement of what they've done. So depending on what the situation is, in many cases the people on the other end do know, and in many cases they haven't got a clue. Somebody might have done something and there's no benefit in going and saying, I just want you to know that I forgive you for doing such and such, and the person thinks I had no idea that I'd done anything. You know what I mean? So I can't give you a set of rules on how to process that, but I believe, again, all I can say is ask God to show you, is there something that I need to do to bring some closure to this in this particular situation. For many of you, you'll find there may be one thing that you think, yeah, I really need to go and sit down with that person, or to contact that person, or to write that person. If the people are dead, that are the act, it's really helpful to write a letter and go and stick it on their grave, or you might ceremonially burn it, but at least you've done it. You've gotten that pain and that anger, whatever it is, you've gotten it out and you've got it down on paper. So that's just some final thoughts for you on that side. So we'll just make a bit of a start. We're probably going to run out of time to do much. But so now that the phase 2, suggest that you deal with that. So phase 2, and I'll have to think it's almost going to be another series perhaps to deal with this properly, but we need to be able to forgive ourselves. Now that is quite a different animal to forgiving the other person. Remember, I got you to do the list of the things that you can think of that you've done that you need to deal with. So what I think we might do just quickly now is I'm just going to tell you some stuff that you're going to have to come to terms with and decide whether you're really willing to be free and whether you really want to be healed. So if we're going to deal with forgiving ourselves, what that's going to deal with, what we're going to have to deal with, so if we're talking about forgiving ourselves, we're going to have to find a way to deal with our guilt and with our shame, and we're also going to have to embrace a thing called restitution, which means that what this means is that we're going to have to be willing to put some things right. So I'm telling you this up front because if you're not willing to do that, then I'm going to make you feel worse by the end of this series that I'm doing now. So what I'm saying is, if you've stolen something or whatever it is that you might have done, and there's been a financial loss or some form of loss to another person, we're eventually going to have to get to the place where, okay, the only way to actually really deal with this, with dealing with our own stuff, is to put that right, and is to go and pay the money back, or whatever it might be. So the biggest issue in forgiving ourselves is actually that we live in shame, we walk in shame, and we think that we're substandard and not worthy of forgiveness. Now again, the only true identity, the only true self-worth that we find is an understanding that we were created and designed by God, and that we're incredibly wonderful beings, and that we were loved before we were born. And so I'm warning you again, there's no answers outside of God. There are no answers to self-hatred outside of God. No psychiatrist or psychologist can help you. So I have to be really brutally frank about that, because I'd be wasting your time to suggest anything else. So this is where we're going to go with this. Tomorrow we'll get into this in some detail. I'm going to give you a whole step-by-step how to deal with self-hatred, how to deal with shame, how to get to that point of acknowledging who we are and feeling good about ourselves. The definition of humility is having a realistic understanding of our strengths and our weaknesses, the good things and the bad things in our life. And we all think that humility is weak, and that is nonsense. Humility is truth and balance and reality. So that's where we're going. And I know some of you who I even know personally through mentoring groups and different things, that many of you, most people in society, struggle with this, the need to forgive ourselves, and the wanting to feel good about ourselves. You look at the behaviour of so many people in business and in different areas, and it's fueled by this incredible desire to be loved and accepted and to feel good. There is no answer to it outside of God. We have this God-sized shaped hole inside of us, and nothing else will fill it. So we'll spend the next few days going through this. I want to do it thoroughly, because it will change your life. You'll never be the same again if you're willing to embrace the truth that I want to share with you. Thank you again for your time, and look forward to seeing you tomorrow. Bye-bye.